good.
Trust me, I know the feeling. All the players that you wanted to be good.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the 123rd episode of the Philly Blitz Pod. I'm your host, Pierre Baptiste, joined by my co-host, Mr. Forness, and we have a special guest, Vikings beat writer Tyler Forness. How you guys doing?
Dog, I'm good. We were talking about the CFL right before the show because I'm an addict. Jareth Stearns is the starting slot back for Winnipeg. That's a throwback name. God, I love that little guy.
Oh, my goodness. See, this is why I love talking to this man. Talk about getting you in your element. Well, I love a dub to those who celebrate. It is I, the one and only Marquell Fripp Owens. Usually it is bright and sunny in Philadelphia, but boy, Tyler, you joined us at the perfect time because it's only October, but I swear I seen some hail falling outside from my home all the way in Washington, D.C. up there.
It's a lot of violent weather in the streets of Philadelphia these days.
Yeah, and only half of it's coming from Jalen Hurts, so we're all good.
In honor of our great guy Parth, we gotta drop the number bomb. What shall I say? You said 113?
123.
123. Should I say the Jalen Hurts Rodney McLeod episode?
Rodney McLeod.
Got to put some good vibes in the air.
No, it's the Jackson 5 episode.
Oh my
ABC. Easy as 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
See, this is what happens when you allow teams that probably shouldn't beat you. You open yourself up to these kind of jokes. We was joking last week, like, man, this is what it feels like to be back in the poverty. We haven't lost a game in so long. We done lost 2 games in a row. The worst thing possible was for that second game to be on a Thursday because we didn't have a 10-day break in between. And the last 10 days or the last 7 days up to this point, I've been sitting here like, I think I might kill myself.
You wouldn't make it a day in my shoes, man.
We got people saying Tanner McKee should start over Jalen Hurts, though.
It's a cold world out here. It's a cold world.
I'm gonna leave what I said pre-show in the pre-show, but yes.
Clearly, you guys see we got a great show in store for you today. We're here to preview Eagles Vikings, man. Of course, before we get into any ball talk, obligated for Pierre to give us the great injury report.
All right, so starting looking at the Vikings, J.J. McCarthy, earlier this week, there was some thought that he could go, but he was limited Wednesday, Thursday. He's listed as questionable, but Kevin O'Connell said today that Carson Wentz is going to be the starter. Moving down, right tackle Brian O'Neill, he was limited on Wednesday and Thursday. He's questionable heading into the matchup. Andrew Van Ginkel, the linebacker, he's out. Looking elsewhere, Michael Juergens, their backup center, he's backup or third string?
Okay, so it's a weird deal. Going into the year, he was the backup center. Ryan Kelly's obviously on IR, dealing with I don't know if it's 2 concussions or he passed the concussion protocol but wasn't all the way ready, because that can happen. You can pass the protocol and it'd still be semi-lingering. Well, then he suffered another one. So is it 1 long concussion or 2 separate ones? I'm not a medical doctor, but he's on IR. So Juergens was hurt and missed the Browns game with a hamstring injury. And then Blake Brandel, who was drafted as a left tackle, never played on the interior in college or the NFL, was the starting left guard last year, and he was the emergency center. So he's going to be starting. But he also played really well at center, and there's like talk in the organization that it just might be his spot. So it'll be fascinating if Carter ends up playing, what that looks like, because his big thing is he can't deal with speed around the edge, but he can do everything else. So can he handle Carter? I don't know. I want to find out.
You guys got a lot going on your offensive line.
No shit. It's rough.
But elsewhere in terms of designations, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, he's listed as questionable. Tyler Batty, he is also listed as questionable. And that's it for the Vikings. Looking in the Eagles, on the Eagles front, Quinyon Mitchell, he's a full go, thank God. Landon Dickerson, he's back.
We're gonna talk about that
one. Jalen Carter, he's back. The only player, he said he was playing.
He said he was playing. I done heard a lot of players say a lot of things. I don't know if they just taking it easy with him, but he was a full go on Wednesday. But he was limited both on Thursday and Friday. So I'm not sure if it was some kind of setback thing or if they just taking it light. I mean, again, he said he's playing, but I'm watching.
You guys will know better than me. Was that heel injury more legit or more, I'm not playing at MetLife?
Somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Because from everything that I've seen, he came out and I don't know if he warmed up or he attempted to warm up or something like that. And then he had a conversation with his agent who then spoke to Howie and he went back in. So
yeah. That's what I say, somewhere in between. They as soon as they step foot on the field, and I think something similar with Quinyon. I mean, hamstrings are tricky, but I think once what happened, it was like, yeah, not here, not on this field. I don't think they wanted to lose the way that they did, but I think that if they were to punt on any game during the season, it'll probably be when they go to MetLife every year.
Okay.
Yeah. But elsewhere, in terms of designations, Grant Calcaterra, he is out. He's dealing with an oblique injury, the number 2 tight end. But that is it on the Eagles front for injuries.
So it's time to get into some nitty gritty, man. Time to talk Eagles, Vikings, man. We want to start on our side of the ball. Eagles offense versus Vikings defense. The torture chamber known as Brian Flores and all the hell that he brings against the shadow of the Eagles offense or whatever the hell they have been up to this point. I mean, they say it's been good vibes in the locker room. You saw A.J. Brown and his presser, and you saw him and Cooper joking on the practice field. The vibe seemed high coming off the mini bye, but we got to see if all this translates to good football, man. They say they talked about getting the offensive staff together. So tell me how you guys feeling about Philadelphia first and foremost against this Vikings defense.
Can they catch the Vikings in the rare time that they play man coverage? They play man coverage, one of the lower rates in the league. They love to play zone. But one of the big things for me is their best cover corner is Byron Murphy's 5'10 and a half, 190 pounds. A guy like A.J. Brown in straight man coverage can theoretically bully him. But one of the ways that they play man coverage is they don't like to play like heavy press. They like to play back, and then they like to crash and attack the football. They like to attack the hands. So, and that's why Isaiah Rodgers was, I know that's a little bit of a sore spot for Eagles fans. Fair enough. You have to watch Keely Ringo play football. That's torture enough as it is. But hey, trust me, I cover the Minnesota Vikings. I've seen some bad corners. We've had like 2 good corners in 25 years. It's rough here. But the way they like to play is perfect for Rodgers. You can play a little off, don't have to press, and then use the quickness and aggressiveness to attack the football. And I think it suits him well. But with a guy like Brown, if you play too far off, he's a power forward. All he has to do is take 3 steps, cut inside, and you can just pepper in slants. And then all of a sudden you have to adjust, and then he can beat you over the top. So catching the Vikings when they do play man or hitting the honey hole, which Hurts can do, but is he going to be able to do so well enough with how the Vikings stay multiple in their defenses and how they love to do pre and post snap rotations? Are you going to be able to catch them in the way that you want? That's a big question mark for me. If you can, the Eagles could have a field day, but it's a big if. And it's something teams really haven't been able to do consistently. Flores wants you to kill them by 1,000 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, if you can run for 6 yards a carry against me, okay, do it. Well, the Eagles did it in week 2 of 2023 and won. But they're just going to say, no, you're not going to be able to beat us with the deep passing game. So beat us doing all the boring stuff. Not a lot of teams can do that. Not a lot of teams like to do that. But that's the fascinating element for me. What's A.J. Brown look like in coverage? And are they going to be able to sustain 1,000 cuts?
It's such an interesting matchup to look at because, like, on one hand, Jalen Hurts in this offense, they've been much improved against the blitz and teams that do a lot of the simulated pressures and things like you talked about in terms of rotations from pre to post snap. I think we saw it in the first half against Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Todd Bowles. And again, it disappeared in the second half, but this has just kind of pretty much been the story for this team. And just looking at what you talked about, Quell, earlier on in terms of the meetings and the AJ Brown, Cooper DeJean on the practice field and everything like that, brother. It is week 7. How are we here already?
Look, man, this is Philadelphia football for you, man. This is how we get the ball rolling. We're sitting here earlier today, looking at each other like, look, Keely Ringo just cut the dreads off. Last year was Nick Sirianni. He got the Baldini. Maybe this is all the good vibes that we need. Something has to give. So this is Philadelphia for you, brother. It gets crazy here.
It's week 7, and we've already had 2 team meetings to get the offense back on track. It's crazy. But no, this matchup is so interesting because, like I said, you have the whole simulated pressure and Jalen Hurts improvements with dealing with that and everything like that. And then, like you talked about, Tyler, in terms of the Vikings run defense and the Eagles, I guess, lack of ability to run the ball consistently. I'm really interested to see how Kevin Petula wants to attack this Vikings defense. What is his plan of attack? Like you talked about before we got on, Tyler. Does he have answers for Jalen when you guys play zone or when you guys do the little simulated pressure looks and everything like that? So those are going to be some of the things I'm watching for.
So what makes this game so interesting to me is just kind of putting some numbers behind all the good things you guys were saying. This Vikings defense, they run cover 2 at the second highest rate in the league, 29%. One thing that stands out behind that is they're a zone heavy team. We've been spending the last couple of weeks talking about the Giants and the Broncos, these 2 teams that absolutely live in man coverage, who were able to they tried their hand at what they like to do. They also dibbled and dabbled to throwing some simulated pressure, some zone coverages at Jalen to see, trying to mix and match everything. We're here. You're going to get your cover 2 and you're going to get your whole hell of amount of fire zones. I believe the Vikings run fire zones at a 34% clip. To give you some context here, the NFL average of running fire zones is 13%. So it's coming. And it's coming a whole lot. Like Brian Flores is a maniac here. Now, the problem with all this is, like you talked about, the Vikings and their defense against the run so far. So far, they're giving up 132 rushing yards per game, 4.5 yards per carry. It actually goes up even more to 5.6 when you talk about the quarterback position. So hopefully we can see a little bit of Jalen Hurts runs out there. But just look at some of the guys that played. Quinyon Judkins, 110 yards, 22 rushes. Kenny Gainwell, old friend. Hey, Kenny G, playoff Kenny. 19 carries, 99 yards. Bijan Robinson, who we seem to keep mentioning his name a whole lot on this podcast these last few weeks. It's like they keep finding the same opponents we play. But him, 22 carries, 143 yards. With Tyler Algier dialing in 76 more on top of that. They can be ran against. Now, the question is, will they get Blake Cashman back first and foremost? I think that is a huge factor in all this. It's already Hurts missing Andrew Van Ginkel, fan favorite here. But being able to stop the run for Minnesota should be priority number 1. But based on what you said, they kind of going to give Philadelphia the easy stuff, will you be able to live by death by 1,000 paper cuts? Well, Tyler, my friend, welcome to the Philadelphia Eagles offense. Nice, boring, and death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah, this offense is weird because it should be a juggernaut, and it's just not right now. But at any time, they could put up 50 on you. And that's the one thing you're worried about because this offensive line is not as good as it has been in years past. Mailata doesn't look to be the same kind of all-pro caliber player so far this season that he has shown in the past. Lane Johnson might just be the best offensive lineman to have ever played football. Like, he's just absolutely insane. But Tyler Steen's a significant downgrade from Mekhi Becton, and that's no slight on Steen. He's just not Becton. And obviously missing Landon Dickerson has been rough. And I think he's questionable for this game, which if he plays, that's a huge boost to that interior. Then the interior is where you can beat the Minnesota Vikings in the run game. Javon Hargrave, who you guys know well, is a great pass rusher. I think he should be a DPR. but they play him a lot in base rundowns. And guess what? Double teams bitch him. It's bad. They just wash him out completely. I think one play against the Falcons, they brought him to his knees and folded him over. Rough. But he's great at what you ask him to do, which is rush the passer. And Brian Flores talked about, well, we know he's getting a lot of attention, so we have to figure out ways to get other guys to step up. And he kind of related it to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, like conceptually. When Jefferson gets double and triple teamed, Addison, you're up. Let's go. Take advantage of the coverage opportunities that you have. And that's kind of how they're approaching the defense. But they don't have a true nose tackle. And getting Blake Cashman back, honestly, I think could fix their run game, because he went out late in the third quarter against the Bears, has not played since. And he is why Ivan Pace has been able to be so successful in the league. Pace is 5'10 and a half, 230 pounds, and he can get under offensive linemen. He can use the 5 Ds of dodgeball: dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, and just avoid everything that the offensive line can throw at him. And by getting that penetration, it makes an impact in the backfield. 2 things have been rough this year. 1, he's missing a lot more of those tackles than he did last year. And 2, when those get missed, Blake Cashman has the ability to backfill and make up for those mistakes. Eric Wilson cannot do that. And those are 2 big reasons why the run game has been so poor as far from a defensive standpoint. But they've essentially sacrificed the run game, so to speak. They're number 1 in EPA per dropback. They're number 2 overall in EPA, and they're number 3 in dropback success rate. This defense will not let you throw the football. They're also number 1 in average depth of target at just 5.9 yards. They are forcing you to get the ball out quickly. They are forcing you to throw it short, and they are not letting you take advantage over the top because they are rushing the passer well. The sack numbers aren't there. It's only a 13, but everything else is just built up, and they are forcing you to do things that you don't want to do because they're that good. And honestly, this might be the smartest defense in the league because of what they can do pre and post snap rotations. There was one play against the Browns where they started single high, then they showed quarters, then they showed 0, then they showed 2, and then it turned Tampa 2. I think that was the order, but they're just showing you like 4 or 5 different coverages and be like, all right, figure it out, bucko. And it's just so much fun to watch, and just maddening. And Hurts is going to have a rough time.
So I love Vic Fangio. Please don't get this misconstrued. I love Vic Fangio, but Brian Flores coaches defense like the way I feel like I would if I was the defensive coordinator. Like, the dude just creates so much havoc. He dictates to the offenses he's facing, like you just talked about. They'll show you 3-4 different coverages pre-snap and show you something entirely different post-snap. It's amazing to see.
So what makes this game so interesting to me is, and you kind of answered one of the questions I had for you, Tyler, where I did want to know, because I got some friends over in Atlanta, and they talk about the Falcons, who right now, by the numbers, have the number 1 defense in the league. And they say, I mean, don't get me wrong, the defense is playing out of their mind, but don't let the numbers fool you. It's easy for Atlanta to be the number 1 defense in the league based on opponents they've been playing against and their starting field position for offenses and stuff like that. It's been rough for where offenses start. So, and it's a yardage thing when you have that conversation. But when you talk about Minnesota, I was curious to know, was the passing defense that good because it was that good, or was it because teams just saw, well, we can run the ball? There's no reason, not really a reason for us to try to throw the ball. So I was curious to hear you say that. Now, in terms of the things that Brian Flores could do pre-snap, I never thought I'd sit here and say that this was a blessing, because God damn it, we've been complaining about this for the last 5 years. But I'm not really concerned about the things Brian Flores can do to Jalen Hurts pre-snap, because we don't have a pre-snap, Tyler. We get to the line with 10 seconds left in the play clock. We're looking around and we don't get the ball snapped till 2. So there is no time for him to get confused. There's no time for him to even identify what the defense is doing. He looks up and he says, okay, this could possibly be that. I need the ball now. I need the ball now. I need the ball now. That is how the Philadelphia Eagles offense has been working so far. So it's hilarious, because this game, it's like a blessing and a curse for Philadelphia. All the things that Jalen struggles with, from the cover 2 to the zone blitzes and all the stuff, he's going to see a whole hell of a lot of it. But all the things that this team needs to get right on the offensive side of the ball, it's right there for them based on the matchup. You should be able to run the ball. You talked about how the numbers in the interior should work for their metric. The Eagles love to run inside zone. Please don't try to change it now. We're in one game where you don't have to change it. Just run inside zone. But there are a lot of things pointing in the direction where offensively this could be. I'm not going to say it because we've been said it the last 2 weeks. You guys should know what I was about to say. But it seems like every time I say it, things go awry. But a way for them to get it together.
Yeah. The big thing for me with this Vikings defense is all the struggles that Jalen Hurts has throwing the football are playing right into the strengths of what this defense is. So let's break down the numbers. Jalen Hurts against zone coverage with a blitz, 36 dropbacks, negative 0.32 EPA per play, 36.11 success rate, and 4.69 yards per attempt. Overall against zone, he's 28th of 34 quarterbacks per True Media. Now let's go to the Vikings defense. Zone coverage with a blitz, they've run it 44 times. They have an EPA allowed of negative 0.57, a completion percentage allowed of 54.1, and a yards per attempt of 4.6. They are going to run a lot of zone. They're going to blitz a lot, and blitzing with the Vikings is different. It's obviously a high number, but they'll line up 5 guys and just send the 5 guys. Like, you'll have 3 defensive linemen and 2 edge rushers, and they'll just send those guys. So it's a blitz, but it doesn't feel like a blitz. Then they'll do some funky stuff where Dallas Turner will drop, and he's a great dropper in coverage. Vikings fans around here think he's just this huge bust because he only has 1 sack, but he's played 241 snaps and only 85 of them have been rushing the passer. Of those 85 snaps, 12 of them are pressures, 14.12% pressure rate. That's pretty good.
I don't mean to cut you off, brother. Y'all remember them numbers he just said. Don't give him too much, just a little bit. He dropped a piece on this. Y'all go check out the piece, man. Click the piece. It was awesome.
Thank you.
That just gave you a little deep dive into why the Dallas Turner conversation is so fun. But go ahead, keep going, man. I just wanted to make sure you got your plug for that.
I appreciate that. The biggest thing with Dallas Turner, if you remember when Anthony Barr was a Viking, so much of what he did didn't show up on the stat sheet. And this is not meant to be an insult. It's something that I've observed over my time in the business. Fans don't look at the game the way I do, because fans look at it from a more simplistic angle, because sports are supposed to be fun. They're not looking at EPA per play. They're not looking at all this deep dive stuff. They're not watching all the all 22. They see, oh, Dallas Turner, I'm not seeing him make plays on the field. He only has 1 sack. He's not very good. And when you, because I used to be kind of like that when I was a kid, where I'm like, why isn't he getting sacks? What's going on? I'm not noticing him. Well, he's being asked to do a lot of boring stuff. He's got 44 dropbacks into coverage. He's moving incredibly well, very fluid in how he does that. And I'm really impressed with his strength profile. You can just look at him and he looks like a different player, because he looks like he's about 255 pounds now. I'm guessing by next year he'll be closer to 260, because they'll really have his body where they want it. And he can set the edge in a much improved fashion. He's got baseline abilities as an edge rusher and a dropper, and just as an off-ball linebacker. And those baseline abilities, having improved so much, gives you a much improved version of the player, but you don't see that kind of thing. That doesn't show up on the stat sheet. It does not show up when you are watching live. It shows up when I break down the film. It shows up when you look at the advanced data. When you look at, like, for the first 3 games, the Vikings EPA per rush allowed was like 0.15 points higher or better, depending on how you look at it, with Dallas Turner on the field. They're a much better run defense with him out there. They've also missed Van Ginkel throughout the last 4 games. He's played a total of 8 snaps. In those 8 snaps, he had 2 sacks. So not having Van Ginkel has been unfortunate for this team, because then when you have him and Turner on the field, then you can run some really funky stuff, because Blake Cashman's also a tremendous blitzer. And Mark, well, you mentioned the fire zone stuff. Flores is obsessed. And you can show fire zone looks with 3 guys, and then you can drop one of them, and you can run all these sim pressures and do all these funky things because all 3 of them, Van Ginkel's a middle linebacker in college, and he's turned into an all-pro edge rusher. Blake Cashman was a do-it-all guy at Minnesota before he came to the league. Then he was a special teamer, and then he thrived in D'Amico Ryan's defense before coming here. And Dallas Turner is a do-it-all guy with 34.5-inch arms, great length, great size, and the ability to run the pole with tight ends and running backs in Tampa too. He can do everything, and having that kind of versatility is what this defense has been honestly built upon, because it was a slow process. You couldn't give Flores everything right away. They slowly built it up, and now you can be so multiple with these guys, and because of that, it's going to confuse the offensive line for the Eagles somewhat. They're smart. Jeff Stoughton's one of the best to have ever lived. They'll figure it out over the course of the game, but there will be some moments where they just absolutely duke them. And you have to take advantage of those moments. You have to force Jalen Hurts to throw a stupid ball, or you have to get a sack. And those are going to be the biggest plays of the game to me. When you can get that pressure on Hurts, when you can bait the offensive line into doing something that they normally wouldn't do because of how confusing this defense is. Because remember, you talk about Jalen Hurts bringing the offense up to the line of scrimmage with 10 seconds left. It's worse for the offensive line to deal with that than it is the quarterback. So Cam Jurgens is going to have to call out those protections. Obviously, you have the protection in mind, but if you're doing a bunch of rotations and all of a sudden from 10 to 3, you've already rotated twice, well, it can create some thinking. And when you think on a field, you lose. So those are going to be the moments where the Vikings need to take advantage if they want to win this football game.
You know, I'm glad you put it like you actually eloquently put. And we talked last week about how Jalen Hurts, I believe the Eagles lead the league in 7-man protections because Jalen Hurts has just been blitzed so much this year. I believe the number and how often he's been blitzed was on 44% of his dropbacks. 552 yards, 67% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 interceptions, 9 sacks. And with them leading the league in 7-man protections, it's way too often where you see teams run some of these 5 zones, like you said, with the 3 guys, or just basically dropping so many guys in the coverage they're just looking around like there's no answer here. And us as fans, well, we know there's no answer, guy, because you only have 3 men out running routes, and it's like 7 people in coverage, 8 people in coverage. It's impossible to beat that. So the chess match that will be had, again, I said it a second ago. They said today, Jalen Hurts has even said, you've heard from everybody that they've had some kind of structure. They feel like this week of practice was probably the best week of practice all year, that they feel like the offense should be quote unquote fixed. That's just probably the worst matchup to try to test that theory against, man, because like you said, Brian Flores, they're going to give them hell. And A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, they're going to have their chances, man. They're going to have their chances because you talk about the Eagles trying to catch them in coverage, in man coverage. Good luck with that. Well, I think the better chance is the Eagles trying to catch them in cover 6. And I'm going to have the same conversation on the other side with the Vikings. Cover 6 is going to be a popular theme on this podcast. But we're going to have where just try to hope A.J. Brown is the guy on the quarter side where you can get you a one-on-one downfield and hopefully, just maybe, you can take advantage of some of those opportunities because they're going to be far few where they've tried to evolve into this down the field passing offense over the last few weeks. Over the first month or so of the season, they were just this, like I said, death by 1,000 paper cuts. We're okay getting 3-4 yards a play, tush push, and we'll do that down the field, and we can win games like that. It'll be very interesting to see which Philadelphia Eagles offense you see, man.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I found, I only have the data through 5 games because I haven't checked out match quarters in a couple of days since Cody Alexander dropped the new stuff. But through the first 5 weeks, the Eagles had faced 20% of their dropbacks with a 4-man exchange. So that you have a somebody blitzing and then a D lineman dropping. Guess who loves to do that?
Mm.
The Minnesota Vikings are obsessed with doing that. In 23, it was Bengal Hawk, where whatever center or direction the center slid, those two inner guys on the interior dropped. They don't do that anymore because Bengal Hawk kind of got figured out enough to where they don't really use that blitz package at all. But they do like to have guys like Cashman and Turner standing up in the A gap, and then they'll drop because they can. They don't have Hargrave and Allen, those guys dropping. Grenard will drop. He drops a decent amount, like 4 or 5 times a game. And he's good enough at it to where it's not like a deterrent. We in 23, we saw Daniil Hunter dropping back. It just looked awkward. That dude is such a bull in a china shop. And he's so methodical with how he plays. He did not fit this defense at all, but he was still really good in it. And Grenard is a perfect fit in this defense because of how quick he is off the ball, how explosive he is in being able to penetrate the backfield, and the fluidity to be able to drop back into coverage. So that's another way to confuse this offensive line. That's another way to confuse Jalen Hurts and make him think for just a split second longer. And then all of a sudden, you're sacked. Those are the kind of things that Brian Flores is going to continue to do. But the answer to me is simple. Run the piss out of Saquon Barkley. That's it. If you run Saquon Barkley and it doesn't work, you're screwed. Straight up. If you run Saquon Barkley, goes for 150 and 2 touchdowns, you got a real good chance to win.
And the crazy thing to me is, like, before we move on to the Vikings offense and Eagles defense, if you watch Thursday Night Football last week, they were able to get Saquon going early on. It's just they just moved away from it. They stopped running the ball. And I'm like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, man.
I think the number is 12 or fewer carries in each of the last 2 games. Gotta stop it. Unacceptable.
No, I agree. Completely unacceptable.
Yeah. But switching gears to this Vikings offense and Eagles defense, I'll set the table for you guys, and then you guys can get into it. The Minnesota Vikings are quarterbacked by Carson Wentz. Hello, old friend, Mr. Wentz. He was asked earlier this week about his time in Philly, and he basically kind of gave a generic answer. I've seen a lot of the reporters nationally and locally referring to it as a quote-unquote revenge game, which doesn't really make sense to me because he's already played the Eagles and everything like that. But just diving into the matchup a little bit, like we talked about before, there's a lot going on with this Vikings offensive line. Both Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, starting left tackle and right tackle, they've dealt with injuries early this year. Christian Darrisaw, I think he returned from a torn ACL and MCL, right, Tyler?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's dealing with that. They've had a ton of injuries elsewhere on the line. They're on their third string center, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Blake Brandel is the utility guy in the offensive line, and he had never played center in college or the NFL until last week.
Yeah, so it's a lot going on up front for the Vikings. And to me, that bodes well for the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. That's getting Jalen Carter back. Of course, we've possibly. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm taking it as 100%, but yeah. We've talked a lot this year about the lack of production from the edge room. We saw Zadarius Smith retire last week and everything like that. Nolan Smith, he's out. Jalix Hunt. It's going to be Jalix Hunt. It's going to be Zizo Jalari. I'm forgetting another guy. Josh Uche. And I know they asked Vic about the rookie DN. What's his name, Q? I'm forgetting. This is bad podcasting by me.
You talking about APR?
Yeah, Antoine Paul Ryland. Yeah, and I think he said that he wasn't ready. They had a couple of guys in front of him, but they're going to need production from the edge spot from anybody, whoever they can get it from, they're going to need it. But going against this Viking offensive line, like I said, that's dealt with a lot of injuries up front, they should have their chances.
I'll say this, and theoretically you're right. They are going to have their chances, but go watch the second half of that Browns game. And that final drive, they stonewalled that unit. Carson Wentz went 9 for 9 and led a touchdown drive with 4 starters missing and a third string center. They didn't just stonewall Myles Garrett during that second half. They stonewalled him the entire game. He had 2 pressures, and one of them was like a chase through pressure where Carson Wentz had to escape through the opposite B gap and got past the line of scrimmage. They pretty much neutralized him. And it was a very, very impressive performance. Now, look, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it every week. But they were so good considering the circumstances. And if you get Brian O'Neill, even with a knee brace, Brian O'Neill is like, if Lane Johnson and Penei Sewell didn't exist, Brian O'Neill would have been an all-pro by now. But he's at a loaded position. And he doesn't get a lot of that respect because the offensive line, unfortunately, is a position that is built upon reputation. You have one really good year, all of a sudden, everybody just, oh, he's really good, give him all-pro. Like, that's kind of how a lot of this voting goes, and it's unfortunate. O'Neill has been a victim of that. He's way better than a lot of the awards will tell you. But if you have both starting tackles back, oh, buddy, it's going to be real hard to get around any of them. And then the interior is just going to get all the help because now all of a sudden, hey, you can just do a 4-man slide away from Darisaw and just be like, have fun, try and beat him. Like, that's how they like to play. They have that much respect for Darisaw. So I'm very intrigued by this matchup, but the confidence I'm feeling from you right now, I would not have that confidence with how this offense is shaped over the past 2 weeks.
It's an interesting matchup, to say the least.
I think they're going to get 3 or 4 sacks, but I don't think it's going to be a dominant Eagles defensive line performance. I think.
Oh, certainly not.
Yeah.
Not with the way that they've been playing so far. But I was just actually about to get into. We just talked about the Eagles and Jalen Hurts and his issues against the blitz. We've been talking a whole hell of a lot about Big Zen, as we refer to him as, Uncle Vic, as the public says, and his willingness to blitz this season. I don't know what has gotten into him, but
he has to. He has to. We're not getting no production from the edge spot.
Exactly. But when you talk about this Vikings team who has a negative 0.52 EPA per drop back against the blitz and a 39% success rate, which is 29th in the league, you might see a little more. It's plausible. Now, again, is it a want-to kind of thing? Like, theoretically, like Pierre said, you got all these backups on the offensive line. You should want to think you should be able to get home with 4. This should be the words that should not be spoken type of game for the Eagles. But I don't know. This Vikings front, they've allowed 21 sacks through 5 weeks, which is the most in the league through that time. Again, another one of those things where matchup base wise, it's ideally pointing towards the Eagles, but then you start talking about certain things about this Vikings offense where it's like, well, maybe not. How often will they run the ball is the question for me. When you talk about this Vikings offense, they're a fairly pass-happy offense. I mean, they rank 12th in terms of their pass rate at 62% based on True Media. Their highest percentage of first down pass rates team in the league, passing the ball on 56% of their first downs. So that's something to watch out for if you're Philadelphia. But in terms of neutral down and distance, they're kind of at 54%, middle of the pack. So they want to throw the ball. The question is, how successful will that be for them? I've kind of went into a deep dive of my own as to how the passing attack could and should work for Minnesota and how they've used Justin Jefferson specifically. Watching his alignment has been fun. When I seen that 80% of his snaps were taken on the outside and 14%, I believe it was, were at the slot, I was like, it's like 6% missing or something like that. What's going on? So then when I started looking into the film, you start seeing Kevin O'Connell get a bit funky in some of the motions where they're sitting there in weak formation, but there's no halfback back there. And then here comes the motion, and Justin Jefferson's the halfback. And they've done a lot of fun things. They haven't yet using him as the rusher out of that. So something to keep defenses on their heels. But still, those type of formations where you got to play fine Justin Jefferson. Finding Jefferson will be the key part of this game because as I mentioned earlier on, the Eagles love running their cover 6. They try to be middle of the pack a little bit of everything else, but when they're in cover 6, that was the big thing about having Quinyon Mitchell back for this week. You could not have those two guys out there and try to play cover 6 because Justin Jefferson was just going to have a day on crossing routes and whatever else he wanted to do.
Brother, if I had to watch Huey Rango and Adoree Jackson at CB1 and CB2 for my football more time, dog, I might have ripped my hair out.
It was bad. It was bad. But
that's underselling it. It was atrocious.
Dog, you let Jackson Dart look like a good quarterback. That's bad.
So what makes this so interesting is the Eagles' willingness to have Quinyon travel this season specifically. There was an initial thought of, well, what if they just had Justin Jefferson run away from him? And I mean, ideally, he probably could to the slot, but I think the Eagles would feel comfortable with Cooper DeJean and maybe a bit of a bracket or something to that nature, especially if they're going to live in that cover 6 and he's going to run those crossing routes that he does out of the slot that he does, because he basically be running into a hangover safety at that point. But him on the outside, if you can have Quinyon kind of, I don't want to say take him out of the game because it's impossible to take Justin Jefferson out of a football game. He's just so damn good, man, but kind of limited, and make Jordan Addison beat me, but on a cornerback with help, then it becomes a bit more interesting. So I'm intrigued to see exactly how KLC attacks this. The chess match between him and Vic Fangio this week. Hell, we might even see some of that 6-1 that Fangio loves to break out against the Shanahan disciples.
Yeah. It's going to be really, really interesting to watch this matchup. And Kevin O'Connell respects Vic Fangio so much. His first defensive coordinator hire was his right-hand man, Ed Donatel. The problem with almost every Vic Fangio disciple is they don't know how to run the defense.
Yeah,
they know the coverages.
Let me tell you how we refer to it over here at the Philly Blitz. Those people, they run the bastardized version of this defense. We got the real thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. Vic Fangio's not afraid to blitz. Everybody else is, except Ejiro Evero, where his defense is starting to come around in Carolina. They still have a void of talent at a bunch of spots. But they shut the Falcons out in week 3, and they just whipped that ass. So there's potential there. But the big thing with this Vikings offense for me, and Marquell, I would recommend that you split the splits that you kind of read off with the Vikings between weeks 1 and 3 and then 4 and 5. Because obviously the first 2 weeks you had the McCarthy roller coaster. And then week 3 was a little bit of an anomaly. Carson Wentz was still getting his feet underneath him. But then week 4, they really started to break out a lot more quick game. In week 5, it was almost an entire quick game based offense. So we're seeing a big shift in how O'Connell has wanted to call this, because one of my biggest criticisms in 23, which was the year Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, he just asked all of his quarterbacks to run the KOC offense, and they didn't make a ton of adjustments to really help those guys out, especially like Dobbs. The Pastronaut era, where they just had that 3-game streak where it's like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. And then he's just turned into Josh Dobbs again. Like, they didn't do enough to help him with some of just easy buttons, that kind of stuff. And they're doing that with Carson Wentz. They aren't doing slants. Oh my gosh. Vikings fans are just like, run slants, run slants, run slants. Quick game isn't just about slants. It's about getting the ball out in rhythm with timing and getting the ball quick to your guys. And they do a lot of speed outs. They do screens. They do a lot of drags. They have this really cool 3rd down play that I hope they bust out again. It was on the TJ Watt interception against the Steelers, where they'll have a running back in the slot and they'll have him drag, and they'll have 2 to 3 wide receivers on the other side just run vertical routes and sell it enough. And then the second the running back catches the ball, they're blocking. And it's almost like an extended gap play. It's fantastic. O'Connell's broken out a few times and it's worked every time but the TJ Watt pick. So they're doing stuff to make things easier for Wentz. And then all the stuff that they call down the field, it's getting open. Justin Jefferson, if you give any kind of single high look, they're going to throw it. So be prepared for that. You give Justin Jefferson single high with anybody on him, even Quinyon. I love Quinyon. I think he's one of the best young corners in the league. They will take that shot. They took it with Denzel Ward, and Jets just won. So if you give him that opportunity, they'll just check into it and throw it. And they're also going to, like when they run Zeus, when they run that cover 6 stuff, they're going to run cover 2 to the Jefferson side. And then they're going to call quarters beaters for Jordan Addison. And they're going to try to spring him open with the post because they love throwing the post to Addison. He's one of the best in the league at catching it. He doesn't look like he's a strong boy, but he is. And he's incredibly strong at the catch point. It tracks the ball very well, can catch it from pretty much any angle. So those are some real things to look at, because if you have Jefferson on that cover 2 side, they'll try and poach that post with a deep dig route and try to get that safety to bite. And if you can get him to bite, that is how you're going to see a couple of these really take off. I don't know how much they'll run the ball. They do like Jordan Mason, but he hasn't gotten more than 20 carries in a game yet, even with Aaron Jones out. But that 16, 17 carry mark has really been the sweet spot for how much they want to give Mason the workload. And now that they're using quick game, they don't have to run the ball as much because, well, a quick passing game, it's kind of like the air raid theory. If you get the ball out super quick to guys in space, it's basically a quasi running game anyways. So I look at those splits, and I think the last 2 weeks will be a little bit more of an accurate representation of what this offense is and will be for this game, because we've seen such a drastic change in what the offense has been week to week, because they've been in survival mode with all these injuries, especially at quarterback. They had to completely adjust how they play because of the offensive line and Carson Wentz. They're still doing a lot of KOC things, but the quick game element has never been a feature in this offense. They don't want to use quick game. They want to run 7-step play action drops and then throw the deep out at 18 yards. They want to throw dagger. They want to throw mills. They want to throw wave and branch. They want to do all these concepts, but they've had to adjust because of those limitations. The offensive line is all there except Brandel. Well, you may get some of that deep passing game again. So it's a really interesting one, but the last 2 weeks is probably going to be what is the focus, because I think the numbers are a little too skewed from the from when they were a little bit healthier and the McCarthy debacle, because that's just not what this team is anymore. They do still allow a lot of sacks though, so that's not going to change.
That's a bit terrifying. Just one more number to drop on you guys before we get to matchup to watch and predictions so we can get you out of here, Tyler. It's a bit terrifying to hear you say that, because one of the things I had written down was, can the Eagles make life hard on said quarterback here? It was supposed to be J.J. McCarthy. I didn't quite think Carson Wentz had it in him to be that kind of guy, but to listen to you say that KLC has kind of got it out of him. Bo Nix, 13 for 16, 113 yards and a touchdown on passes between 0 and 9 yards. Jackson Dart, 9 for 11, 58 yards on passes between 0 and 9 yards. So the Eagles defense over the last 2 weeks has been able to been had in the quick game. So if he's willing to take those passes, they're there for the taking.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be, like, you guys know Wentz better than I do. I went to a few games at the Fargo Dome when he was in college. And I mean, FCS football is a lot of fun, but it's really hard to do any kind of projection from what you see because of how just spacious everything is. But one of the big things with Wentz is after that first read, you just kind of like, all right, dump off time. And that's fine for a backup quarterback. It's also why he didn't work in the NFL, because he just does not do enough with the progressions and extending plays in a positive way. A lot of the extensions of plays are, I'm just going to run the ball and be a battering ram. Dog, you're a quarterback. You probably shouldn't do that unless you're Dante Culpepper or Cam Newton. Like, I wouldn't even want Josh Allen doing that. I don't care. But those elements, like, you still see superstar elements from him on a probably like 4 or 5 downs a game
to win the game over Denzel Ward.
And Denzel Ward was baiting him. He's like, I dare you to throw this. Okay. And then he just throws a missile, and it's like, yeah, that's the guy who went second overall. He just took it out and laid it on the table, and boom, It worked every once in a while when you're a stud and you like, come get me. Oh crap, I've been got. It happens. But Wentz will have a couple of those cupcake moments. You got to take advantage. You got to take advantage. To me, my biggest matchup to watch, I want to see how TJ Hawkinson goes up against Jahad Campbell. Because with these offensive tackles being back, they're not going to have to chip as much. They may not have to chip at all. And that's where Hawkinson, you just get him 5-6 yards up the field, run choice, and just let him do work. I love Jahad Campbell. He was number 7 on my big board last year. I basically used my platform to beg the Vikings to take him. I wanted him so bad. And then, of course, Howie gets him, and I'm like, nothing's right in the world. Nothing is holy anymore. But I think the world of Jahad Campbell. I want to see where he's at right now. I want to see if TJ Hawkinson can bait him a few times, because Campbell's just a much better athlete, but Hawkinson's so good on choice to where I think you can really take advantage of some of the rookie elements with him. And if you can do that, that really can take the Vikings offense to a different level. And I'm going to be really, really happy if they can use Hawkinson in that way to take advantage of that second level.
So for me, my matchup to watch, I'm looking at this Eagles offensive line versus the interior of the Vikings defensive line. We spent all pod talking about Brian Flores and the evil genius that he is and everything he does from a pre-snap to post-snap perspective and all of these different things, and how the zone blitzes have impacted Jalen Hurts and his struggles and everything like that. And like we talked about at various points, I think this game is going to come down to the Eagles' willingness and ability to run the ball. The Eagles can, create lanes for Saquon Barkley, and we can kind of see a repeat of what we saw early on in the game against the Giants. I think the Eagles have a chance. If not, brother, you talked about the weather. It's going to be hellfire and brimstone in Philadelphia if they can.
Well, I think I kind of piggyback on that. You said the interior offense, the offensive line and the interior of that defense. I'll give you 1+. Saquon Barkley, this has to be your show. Saquon Barkley versus the Minnesota Vikings defense, the entire defense. He has to beat someone. I don't care if you run inside, outside. You have to figure out a way to get Saquon Barkley going this week, man. Saquon Barkley has 0 rushes of 20+ yards this season. You're talking about a guy who we talking about him breaking NFL records for 60+ yard rushes last season. And he can't get above 20 this year. I believe his season has 18, which he set last week against the Giants. And this previous season high before that, he set last week against the Broncos. So maybe it's the build-up. Maybe it's what we need. But Barkley being contacted behind the line of scrimmage on 35.8% of the carries, second most in the NFL behind just Ashton Jeanty. Offensive line, you just talked about having to get them healthy and upright, Pierre. This has to be the kind of game where if they don't get Saquon figured out this week, I might lose hope on if they ever get it figured out this season. And I've been pushing the train a little. Maybe they're just a passing offense. We might have to turn the throttle up a little bit after this, because this is the opportunity, man.
Yeah. Well, now we can get into predictions. I'll go first here. I think this is going to be a first for me. We spent all pod, like I said, talking about Brian Flores and what he does and how it makes Jalen struggle in the passing offense and everything like that. And we just spent about 4 or 5 minutes talking about Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' willingness to run the ball and everything like that. I don't know if I trust this Eagles offense in this game. I think it's become a thing for me where I have to see it to believe it. I have to see them be willing to run the ball. I have to see them execute in the passing offense. And until then, I'm going to pick them to lose this game. We go Vikings 24, Eagles 16.
I think you need to go find you a church or a dog, brother. And it happens to all of us. I understand.
Hey man, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to say it. I'll come on the pod. I'll be the first to say it, bro. Man. I don't know, man.
I get it. I understand how you've gotten to this point.
It's week 7, and we talking about team meetings already, dog. Like,
I mean,
what are we doing?
We was talking about stuff like this in goddamn week 4 last year. So we couldn't wait to get to a week 5 bye week after we got thrashed by Tampa. So I mean, it's a long season. They got a lot of time to get it figured out, but it's surely running. The clock is running low. But I think it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be fun to watch until the second half. It depends on what kind of guy you are. This game might be very reminiscent of the Buccaneers game, where if you look at the metrics of everything, this Vikings team hasn't really been the world beater by any metric in the first half of games. And if anything, the Eagles have kind of figured out themselves in the first half of games. They put up their fair share of points, and then the second half, they just become a shell of themselves, which is when the Vikings begin to figure everything out. The question is, can the Eagles put up enough points in the first half to make what happens in the second half non-existent? So I'm going to go Philadelphia 27, Minnesota 24. The Eagles won't score in the second. They don't score a touchdown in the second half. Jake Elliott's going to score a field goal on the first drive of the second half, and we're just going to pray from there, buddy.
Yeah, this is a tough one to predict because you could convince yourself of about 5 different things going one way or the other with big matchups in this game. Like, you can convince yourself that, hey, Jalen Hurts is going to be just fine. He's going to figure it out again. You can convince yourself that Brian Flores just rains fire and brimstone all over him and just absolutely destroys his Eagles offense. I could be convinced of a lot of different things. I had to predict this game for work, and I predicted 27-20 Vikings. But I think my biggest prediction of this game is going to be that Jalen Hurts throws for less than 150 and Saquon runs for less than 100. Because I think they're going to find a way to stop.
How many points?
Oh, the Vikings are going to gift them something.
Oh,
okay. Like, I'm talking like a 20-yard field kind of gift.
Okay.
I don't trust that Jalen Hurts is going to be able to throw this football. Mainly because I think it's not necessarily about Hurts. It's about what Flores does that Hurts doesn't do well. And in the first matchup that they face each other, I think the week 2 game in 23, Hurts threw for like 87 yards and they still put up like 34 points. I think Hurts will find a way to run the football. And I think he'll put up like 60, 70, 80 yards on the ground. Barkley will not have that DeAndre Swift kind of game, but he'll have a good game. And the Vikings will find a way to pull it out. This defense to me right now for the Vikings is just too good to allow any offense really that they're going to have on their schedule to score a ton, except the Lions. God, I hate those guys. I think the Lions will be able to put up a lot of points on them just because Jared Goff is the perfect quarterback to beat Brian Flores. He's the perfect guy to do it.
Say that.
Him and Stafford, because they're just so cerebral and they can just take 2 steps and fire a ball in the zone. They're just so good at it. That's why the Vikings' 4 losses last year were only to Goff and Stafford. But this is going to be a fun game. It's going to be disgusting. It's going to be ugly football.
I can see why you said that. It was 193 yards, but he had a 63-yard touchdown to Devonta Smith. So
it was 193. Man, I thought it was lower than that. Okay.
But as always, we appreciate your time, Tyler. Before you get out of here, do you want to let the people know any plug or anything you got them to want to look out for?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at The Real Forno. I've been doing a bunch of pregame stuff for A to Z Sports where I cover the Minnesota Vikings, also do some NFL draft, and they added Florida Gators beat writer to my list of duties, which is a lot of fun. I was so good.
Parth.
We gotta get you in contact with Parth.
Hey, we'll take it. And you can also check out my YouTube channel, Vikings First and Skull. We've got a lot of really interesting stuff. If you want a film breakdown, we've got a film breakdown talking real in depth about Vic Fangio stuff, about these Jalen Hurts issues with the Brian Flores defense. I've got a bunch of preview stuff. If you want to get caught up on the Vikings, go check it out on the YouTube channel or podcast feed and get yourself acclimated with the enemy, which is something that's why I like coming on these shows, because I get to get a firsthand view of what the people who cover the team thinks of them, because we're in echo chambers too much sometimes, and we don't get to dive in as deep as we really want to on everything.
We're always happy to have you, brother. Always happy to have you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Philly Blitz pod. If you're listening after this drops as a pod tomorrow on whichever podcast streaming platform you're listening on, be sure to leave us a like and a review. Rate us 5 stars. And we'll be back early next week to review this game. I'm thinking potentially Tuesday, per usual. But until then, go Birds.
Go Birds.
You don't got to give us a go Birds, Tyler.
I guess you can say it.
Well, Vikings.
Thank you for listening, everybody.